And many things that don't look perfect might become better and better as you go along. What I did not know then, and which I know now after many years, is the fact that whatever you go with, it's going to get completely churned very, very quickly. So you have a beautiful model that you make, beautiful kind of business plan that you make. You've also talked to some customers. You've done all of those homeworks, right? So, but the moment actual rubber hits the road, it's going to be completely different. Having a tech co-founder makes a huge difference, certainly in the long run.
We all believe that the business will become the same as the idea that you are born with, right? Like what you have put in your presentation on the pre-seed deck is what will make you a unicorn, right? That's what at least we feel we should know. But clearly that does not happen in real life. So presenting Raghuram Talluri, everybody knows him, needs no introduction, founder of Loadshare, and thank you. More importantly, just swam the English channel. We will go through that experience after some time. But if you ever wanted to show that you have grit, this is an easy thing to do. But very quickly, some statistics on Loadshare. While we know it's a large company, sometimes we forget what a large company scale is. So just to set the context, let me take you through some numbers and then we'll head into the conversation. 2 lakh deliveries a day.
It's now 3.
It's now 3. Always happens. Website's never updated. 3 lakh deliveries a day. I'm taking a leap of faith here. 4.5 lakh tons.
That's gone to less than half. That also happens.
So 200 tons of delivery per day, close to 15,000 delivery partners.
Yeah, 20,000.
Close to 20,000. On the website it says 10. So close to 20,000 delivery partners. You can imagine the scale of this operation, right? Check. Close to 20,000 delivery partners, 3 lakh deliveries a day. It's quite insane. So that's Loadshare for you. Accenture, McKinsey, Myntra startup, very predictable, right? But then you chose the most difficult space and the most difficult terrain. So would love for you to spend some time on your 0 to 1 journey.
Yeah, I think these are some of the times when you make a decision without thinking too much and too deeply, which you've been trained to, and it comes, I wouldn't say it's a leap of faith, but it's a lot of gut and instinct based on which the call was taken. Essentially what Susmit is referring to is, and as many of you might know, logistics is a very, very tough space. Last mile logistics is even within that more complex and more lots of challenges over there. And that what we did was we basically started with Northeast of India as the first kind of market for us, right? All based in Bangalore, but we just felt like, this is the right place to start. There is some logic to that, but I would say, now looking back, I just felt that I was very kind of, I wouldn't say foolish, but I was a little quick into jumping into this space. More gut than really a lot of cold calculated logic and all the previous things that I was exposed to in life, which I used to preach about. I don't think I applied any of that to my own decision making. Because if I actually knew too much, I think it would have been so overwhelming that I would not have ended up doing it, right? So even now I feel like I've eased into or somehow gotten into this whole logistics, but if I knew all that I'm doing now, back then, it would have been a very, very hard decision for me to take. So I'm glad, at least in this case, I didn't overthink it too much and just kind of felt that there is something that is exciting, many dots connected, just to also not make it like a whim, seem like a whim, many dots connected, but there was not too much of overthinking into the decision of the going into this logistics space. So to give some more context in Myntra, I was looking at overall customer experience, and the largest determinant of customer experience was last mile logistics. So I just got drawn towards it. And as I kind of looked at it, I just felt, hey, look, this is quite exciting. And Myntra was at a good place already, but I could still see many gaps. And I just had blind faith in the fact that e-commerce would take off. And this comes from, I grew up in many tier 2, tier 3 cities back when I was growing up. So I just felt that the proposition is very strong. And this is certainly for the next 1-2 decades an industry that I could take a bet on. And within that, I just felt invariably last mile logistics is going to happen, is going to be there. And there are very different models that will come out given the space and the complexity of this. So that was about, so I had exposure. It's not that I had zero exposure. I just decided one day that last mile logistics is the space to get into. But I never went into so much amount of detail as I obviously now I am in, right? So to that extent, it was more of a like a instinct thing. I also did not do too much of an analysis of who's doing, like this is the competitive landscape, here is how it's going to emerge going down the line. And I'm sure if I'd done too much analysis also, it would have been wrong, right? So to that extent, as long as some of the macros are very clear and you have one starting point and some checks that you do kind of seem fine, I think it is worth, kind of, at least for me, I felt it was worthwhile to take a leap. What I did not know then, and which I know now after many years, is the fact that whatever you go with, it's going to get completely churned very, very quickly. So you have a beautiful model that you make, beautiful kind of business plan that you make. You've also talked to some customers. You've done all of those homeworks, right? So, but the moment actual rubber hits the road, it's going to be completely different. In our case, at least, it turned out to be very different. I think then the skill is then to how to adjust. But yeah, to answer your thing on the 0 to 1, it was, I would say, a lot of gut, some thinking, and just kind of a connecting of some very clear dots that I was able to see.
Super. Why don't you tell us that story about the founder, co-founder in your 0 to 1, and how it's never a smooth path, right? Like, yeah.
No, it never is. Maybe some very blessed people will have something all smooth, but for myself and for most people that I know, pretty much everybody that I know, I don't see a single person who can say they've had a smooth sailing all the way. You might be very lucky if you've got smooth sailing in some patches, but I don't think you'll have a full a smooth sailing all the way. I think we've had share of rough tumbles and scratches and bruises and all of those, and kind of going back to fixing things a lot. One of them was right at the beginning. I had a co-founder who was my very close friend. He's still a very close friend. And he basically was, in a way, the reason why I also kind of felt confident enough to go in, because he's commercially super savvy. And I felt, at least at that time, not that savvy. And including in my family, at least my wife felt that iske saath kar rahe ho to chalo, there's a higher chance of success because the guy is so smart, right? so commercially smart, and you have a good complementary side. Now, as luck would have it, I think we pretty much everything done, and then towards the like we are almost launching, or we also got almost when we are kind of signing a term sheet. At that time, the guy says, look, I'm going to work, but I'm going to work in this 50% manner. मैं हैदराबाद में बैठूंगा, मैं ये करूंगा, ऐसे करूंगा, हम करूंगा, right? I said, look, this is not going to work like this, right? So you have to be fully 200%. He basically struck some gold in this new Amravati capital thing that was going on. And he had basically zero need for money. He was always relatively well off, but he had zero need for money. And he said, look, I want to explore multiple other things in life. I said, yeah, abhi jab start kar rahe, you can't, that can't happen, right? So then we had to take a hard call, then saying, look, okay, then you don't be a co-founder, then don't be in it at all, right? So this was a one speed bump right at the beginning, but by that time I had fully mentally, emotionally, every angle I had committed. So there's no question of going back. So I said, let's kind of make do without this, and let's see how we can manage, right? So that was one, and it wasn't a near-death experience, but I think it did feel very like, you know, from more than for me, for my wife and for my family, they said, "Arey, ye nahi tum kaise karoge?" So there were some of those things that you had to kind of like go through. Another one, very similarly, there was another guy who we were almost getting on, you know, on board as a co-founder. He was on the tech side, and he was like, again, fantastic guy, like really off the charts in terms of intellect, in terms of pedigree, etc. And that guy was coming off a failed startups, but he really wanted to do it. And then, like, we had like, you know, one last thing to do when we agreed on this is how much stake, etc. And then he had to sign the line, and that time he got cold feet, and he basically that he also backed out, right? So we had to therefore just go in, like, and by that time again, right, everything was committed. He was coming after we had a term sheet and a financial commitment from one of the VCs, our seed VC. So, you know, and he basically backed out because he had family pressure to say, like, you know, you can't do these kind of things back to back. So why don't you kind of take some? And he was pushing back, and ultimately, I think he kind of went on the, like, sided with the domestic side, which I think is a smart thing from his side. But yeah, we had these kind of like as rocky a start as possible. But now when I look back, I think I think it was for the better. And two, I think that we really managed to navigate it emotionally very strongly. And we said we're not going to add another co-founder. We said, like, we had add two other co-founders, and we basically said no, it's okay. I mean, we'll manage. Dekhte hain, right? We'll figure out something. Company, we have many things lined up, and we will kind of go forward and figure out the answers to like these kind of curveballs as they come along.
Yeah, and you know, I think this is you know, when we see a lot of 0 to 1 founders, and when I talk to people like Raghu, you realize that the problems today, that sometimes we all magnify our problems of today and feel like, oh God, this is all over, right? But imagine you have one of your most important co-founders not signing up with you at the end moment. How many of us in this room will actually go ahead and still do it? Right? So I think, yeah. Yeah, cool. Anubina is one of those. Great. So great. I think you know, just to pick from there, you had a couple of other co-founders as well. So you know, a lot of us in the room here are trying to find co-founders. So how do you think one should go about? Point number one. Secondly, in the 0 to 1 journey or in the first year, how do you divide responsibility?
Yeah.
How do you think about things like accountability, responsibility?
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, very cliched stuff I'm going to tell you, but this is perhaps one of the most important, perhaps it is the most important decision in your whole journey, right? So, getting the right co-founder, and we have to define what does right mean. Right doesn't mean a mini-me or a equal, like identical to me kind of a guy, right? Right has to be phrased in the context of what are you building. But this decision is perhaps the most important one, and there are a few proven paths that I think all of you would also know about how you go about doing it. But I think a lot of it is also serendipity, right? And that's when you have to kind of understand that not everything is in your control. And many things that don't look perfect might become better and better as you go along, right? And I will give our own example. I don't think we had the perfect co-founding team, right, from every angle. But I think we find that over time we've gotten better and we've gelled better, and we are now in our 8th year of operations, and we have actually stronger and thicker than what we were before, right? We know in some ways it's like a marriage. You know what the other person's kind of lacunae, gaps, challenges are, and you know, and they know yours, and you kind of figure out a way to work with the thing being you have to have like a lot of trust, right? I think that's like the common denominator is that. So I think on the paths to finding a co-founder, one thing I'll tell you besides the obvious ones, right, is the fact that look for complementarity. It is critical to make sure that for the problem that is the co-founder answer is different for what problem you're solving, right? And I think that's perhaps one of the biggest learning. I didn't really kind of think too hard about it. I kind of made that choice, but I felt the answer could be different or would have been not, might have been like maybe in some ways maybe better, who knows, but might have been worse if we didn't kind of over index on the complementarity kind of a thing, right? And which means that you are, you know what your skills are and you know how your skills help you kind of address the problem statement that you're working on, right? But you also need to know what are the other things that are required at a core team, not at like okay, this person is okay, I think this is marketing thing, I can hire a marketing person, not like that, right? Right at the beginning, the problem will have two three kind of critical things that you need to be able to ace, right? And those need to be ideally within the, I would say, founders, or maybe just to expand that a little bit, in the founding team, right? And the founding team is almost pretty much, there might be like, in a way, you should not make any distinction between that and the founders. So it has to be pretty much the set of guys who are coming on board on day one or month one or maybe month two. But that team should have all the like skill sets that are required for solving that particular problem. That's one of the things that I feel people don't kind of index as much on. They say, okay, look, okay, this guy is my best friend, or this guy and I have worked together for 15 years. So therefore, he is a natural co-founder for me, right? Or he and I think alike, or he or she and we think alike, and therefore best kind of partner to start this with, right? I don't think that's the right answer. And in my own context, right, I'll give you an example on this. Just to make it real and live for you. So we started in the Northeast, not because it was a wild kind of a thing, right? We actually felt that, and one of my co-founders is actually from the Northeast, right? So we therefore felt that, look, we have to do something. It was not that we wanted Northeast and therefore this happened, but the fact that when we had this team, we got together, we basically felt we should address, this is an operations intensive business, and our ingoing thing was that we will need to solve it not for Bangalore, but really we need to do it for some of the underserved geographies, right? And the moment that realization came, if I were to reach out to my other batchmates or well settled in a Bangalore or a Delhi and say कि देखो यार problem ऐसा है, आपको जाके बिहार में आपको काम करना पड़ेगा, या he might be my best friend, but I can guarantee you will not do it, right? Or he'll go and he'll do some, okay, let me go and set up something and come back, right? Here, basically, this co-founder of mine, his name is Rakib. I basically, Rakib, you have to go and shift to Northeast. He basically ran away from Northeast to settle in Delhi, and then he came to Bangalore. He was like, तुम मेरे को वापस वहीं भेज रहे हो. I said, look, this is what is required, and I would bet I could not have this. We could not have pulled this off with any co-founder who could be like great on on particular dimensions, because it just does not, like, the complementarity was not there, right? It would be very similar to me. We'll all say, okay, chalo, hum log ko, we have to be here in Bangalore. So some of these things are important considerations. Again, on the technology side, I think, I'm guessing most of you will have some element of tech. I think, and people definitely kind of, I would really recommend that having a tech co-founder makes a huge difference. Certainly in the long run, maybe in the short run it doesn't make too much of a difference, but in the long run I can see how that kind of the attachment right from the, like, at that level kind of makes a difference as the company moves forward, and as obviously most of the ventures would have a very strong element of tech, right? So and we have seen it. For example, I'll give you an example on the logistics company's case. Delivery has a tech co-founder. Some of the other 3PLs, like other peers of delivery, they don't have a tech co-founder. And I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I am sure that's one of the reasons why a delivery's tech platform is, I think, much better than what some of the other guys have, and they keep struggling with tech, right? They are not going to be ever known as tech kind of led, or even like have strong tech that customers will say like their tech is very good to solve our problems, right? So, and it is a direct fallout, in my opinion, of the fact that there is no tech co-founder, right? So these are some things, again, going back to tech, is also another kind of a manifestation of complementarity. I mean, you need, if you're not a tech guy, you better, and your business has a big element of tech, you better get somebody who's a tech co-founder, right? I think that's like two, three, maybe these are all again cliched things, but I think just the search of the co-founder. And I think don't aim for perfection. In many cases, I think it's about getting a good enough match and then trying to make it work rather than saying this is my perfect co-founder, usko aisa hona chahiye, aisa hona chahiye, aisa nahi. This is all too specific. I think if you get a 70-80% match, good enough for you to, and some things they have to be very clear, right? I mean, some things you need to have a common wavelength of thinking, etc., but not across the board, because otherwise then you'll make, you both will have like equal blind spots, right? So yeah, that's the other one, that don't look for perfection. At the same time, don't settle for whatever is available. So you have to get that balance right. Again, some of it will be very cliched, Susmit, but I'll just say it since you're asking me.
No, I think the point that you made on tech for the long term is an eye opener for us, because frankly, this whole AI, no code, low code revolution makes all of us think that we don't even need a tech co-founder, right? ये तो हम ही कर लेंगे. But I think the perspective that in the long run this will eat at you is at least for us the first time you've heard this from anyone. So thank you for that. And secondly, on the perfect co-founder, we keep telling everyone, right? You need to be friendly with the founder, not friends. Right?
Yeah.
All of us try to be the best friends with our co-founder. It's not
correct.
I mean, you don't have to hang out on dinner every day, right? Like, you need to be friendly with them. As long as you shake hands when you meet each other outside work, that should be enough. You should not go at each other's throats. That's the most important thing.
And I would put a lot of onus on, like, on all the co-founders to sidestep small minor issues in the pursuit of the larger thing, right? More value has been destroyed by people not getting along well with each other, and these are mostly not really kind of business related differences of opinion. I think you can logically sort it out, right? I think typically it is personality, and I think it's typically personality and interpersonal things that actually create the challenge. And I think one of the things that one has to do as a founder growing up is you have to almost like make it like a important thing to say, I will make this whole thing work, right? It's an important thing to kind of have that as a thing that it's not, it may not be perfect, but unless things are really off, you should have a lot of adjustment and I think in particular what you need to do is you need to figure out how do you get the best out of that person. I think that level of maturity, I think ideally each of the founders should develop rather than watching out for themselves. I think putting the company and the mission first and then sorting out everything else as a secondary thing is very, very important. Easier said than done, but I think it does need for you to think and consciously be like, act and, believe in that particular manner.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. While you touched upon this right at the beginning, I would love for you to elaborate, right? We all, including venture capitalists like us, we all believe that the business will become the same as the idea that you are born with, right? Like what you have put in your presentation on the pre-seed deck is what will make you a unicorn, right? That's what at least we feel we should know. But clearly that does not happen in real life. Would be great to kind of take us through what you started with, what changed, and where are you at today, right? That will be super interesting to listen, and also a lesson to all venture capitalists who are here, not necessarily founders.
Yeah, I think it's almost like saying when the child is born, that this child ko maine socha ki isko ye Olympic athlete, Olympic triathlon jeetega, right? I mean, he's going to turn out to be something different. So it's very hard. I'm making not really the best of analogies, but I think the point is that the company will take a life of its own. A company will take a life of its own because it is getting inputs from various sides. It's an environment that at least, and now I think it's even more hard to predict what's going to happen 2 years later, right? What will so I think for you to say with being very deterministic about it, saying okay, here is what is going to happen month 3, here is what is going to happen month 6, and here is what is going to happen year 6, just impossible, right? And impossible to the extent that it will absolutely not happen, right? So you will find that, I mean, you cannot then, but at the same time, you will not see that I started with logistic business, now I ended with a fintech business, right? Utna bhi, that's too much of a swing. It can happen, by the way, because we at one point also thought about it. But I think there will be massive changes that the whole idea will go through, and that's natural because the idea that you had will get exposed to new ideas that you're bringing in as you go and meet customers. Their contexts are changing, right? So it is such a dynamic environment that obviously things will not be the same as what you imagined. If you're imagining it, if you can be a crystal ball gazer to that extent, that's amazing. You will see some things for sure, right? And those should not completely change. So for example, in our case, we felt that logistics in like the demand for e-commerce in tier 2, tier 3 will be much more than what will be in tier 1. That is a principle that kind of held. It was not so obvious at that time. People were debating, acha hoga ki nahi hoga. We said, look, this is a thing we are supremely convinced that it's going to happen. So even before people started talking about build for Bharat, we actually started with everything like we said, right? We started from Northeast. So there are some of those things that should play out. You can't be completely wrong either. But I mean, expect the whole thing to keep changing a lot, and I think it must change because then it shows that you are open, you are receptive to what you are hearing from customers, and you are able to iterate very fast, right? If you stay with a model that is not changing, it's a guarantee for you kind of hitting a not just a speed bump but a proper like a crash at some point, right? So being very flexible is almost like a requirement, it's a necessity for you to be kind of moving forward. But sometimes what happens is the dots connect, they don't exactly work at the same pace as what you want. So in our case, for example, I mean, make it live again. So our initial model was let's build software for small logistics companies. These are the courier guys and the mom and pop courier guys who are there in every part of the country, and they used to do all these postpaid deliveries and telephone bill deliveries and credit card statements and all those. We felt these guys have a lot of kind of capabilities in logistics. We will upgrade them to the new era of e-commerce logistics. That was the thought process. And for that, we said in सबको software देंगे, we'll get them on our software platform, which will be e-commerce compatible, and then we'll get them to kind of do it, right? Sounds very good. We also talked to a few guys. Yes, sir, बहुत अच्छा idea है, right? करेंगे. We did like enough checks for us to feel confident and very convinced about it. But when we actually went and tried to get them to adopt the software, few did, and which was the reason for the initial confidence. But very quickly we realized it is a super uphill task to get them to adopt software. And the other one was whoever was also adopting software, for us to be, when we go to a Flipkart and say we will get it delivered, the whole kind of onus on the customer experience lies on you, and you don't have as much control on them, right? So it was a terrible situation for some parts where we said, one, these guys are not adopting it as much. B, whoever is adopting also, we are having a struggle with getting the demand and matching the demand. So we had to kind of not shelve the plan. We said, look, now we have to morph from being a software, we used to call us a fancy word called SaaS enabled logistics marketplace, right? I said, ये सब छोड़ो, सबको सीधा logistics, you have to become a logistics operator. So we made that transition. Didn't sound very good, but we said this is the reality that we have to accept. And then we then started building up a lot more of ops capabilities for us to be able to work with the partners, but work in a much more operationally intensive manner, rather than saying we'll give you software and we'll give you demand and you figure out how to do it, right? So that was like the first kind of big change that happened, and we've continued in that model for a fairly long time. Now in year 5.5 or so, one of our customers, they came to us and said, okay, I know you built software for your own, like for this use case. Are you willing to give it out to us, for us to give it to other small partners pan India? we said, oh, of course, why not, right? And that's now, so in addition to the 3 lakh orders that we do per day, we also power 11 lakh orders per day on this platform called Valmo, which is what Misho has built as its own internal captive logistics unit. So that was, we always used to say, this is exactly what we wanted to do 7 years back. But now we kind of came back to this model after 5.5 years, after going through multiple things. So I think sometimes the dots kind of connect after a while, and sometimes they won't connect at all. But it's absolutely fine. I think what is important is you have to figure, once you're in the game, you have to figure out a way for you to be relevant to what you're trying to do as the primary thing, and you may kind of leave out certain kind of model of how I will do it, and all of those are like the next level details which you can be absolutely flexible on, right? So in our case, we said we are going to build a logistics setup, and then we said for that whatever is required, we'll kind of make that change. I'm not saying it's the right answer. Maybe the right answer would have been to stop and figure out something else. Who knows where that would have ended. But in our case, we said, look, lag raha hai ki the only thing to do in this case is to listen to customers and figure out a way to be relevant to them. And therefore, you change your operating model then to figure out how the world will change to adjust to what you're building, right? So that I think was an important kind of framing difference or framing for us that kind of again defined how we move forward. Again, it is not a necessary formula. I've also seen many people say, I will stick through to this and the world will at some point come around. But there are very, very few instances of that than to adjust to the realities that are much larger and much more powerful than what you are doing, right? So you can do it and figure out a very disruptive product, but one has to be careful that you should not think everything that you're doing is disruptive.
Fantastic point. I think in the current regime where we all are fascinated by Zerodha of the world, Zerodha is in the second category, right? They just built something and said now the world will change and we'll wait for it.
Yeah.
But you imagine it took them 7 years. 7 years, they almost ran out of money twice. They had to pump their own personal money into the company again and again to make it succeed. So while the story now looks beautiful, fantastic, I think that 7-8 year journey that the brothers went through was, I can't even imagine how excruciating it would have been for them. They were stuck at 60, 70 crore profit, I think, forever. And the world was making like 500,000 crore profit even then. And so I think, so one of the things that, the reason why we do this with founders and stress on the 0 to 1 journey is because the 0 to 1 journey is so different from the lens that we look at today, right? It is completely different, right? Sometimes it's a random walk, sometimes it's just having conviction, like I think Raghu made a brilliant point, which is just having conviction that logistics in tier 2, tier 3 will matter. And that is the heart of the business if you think about it, right? So that will matter and we'll just go for it. Sometimes even that much is enough. Couple of more questions before we take a swim with you. One is just on hiring, right? A lot of us here will hire our first 5 employees, first 10 employees.
Yeah.
Lot of literature around whom should you hire, whom should you look for. You spoke about complementary skills. But just to maybe tee this off, generalist versus specialist, right? If you can start from there, and would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, I think hiring is, it has to be a superpower for pretty much all the founders, right? It has to be a place where you invest enough amount of time because this is the highest leverage activity. Of course, there is understanding the business and crafting the right proposition, etc. But once you have, and even for you to get more and more clarity on that, it's important for you to make sure you have a bunch of guys who are who give you that leverage, right? Otherwise, you cannot just do it. Again, very blindingly obvious stuff. But I think the amount of time that you give to hiring is actually quite important. I would say, back when we started, even now, actually, even at this stage, I think for me, in fact, I think the biggest role that I play in the company is to hire the right folks, right? Once there is some clarity, it is just the biggest leverage activity that can be done. So getting that right and kind of having your own playbook. And you can't say hiring is not my strength. That is not an answer, because that is the most important thing, and it is a skill to be developed. Mostly you have it, but even if you don't think you're great at it, you've not done a lot of it in the past, it is a skill to build up, and the biggest kind of, and it's a very learnable skill, right? So I'll come to something more on the hiring side in terms of how much time to give, etc. But the generalist versus specialist, one big thing that you'll start with, which might be very different from your past life, is in your past life you must have done a lot of hiring, but you had budgets, you had whole org mechanism that is helping you. You had a brand name that you could leverage for getting the right people, right? I mean, tomorrow if Antler wants to hire, or if any of the VCs want to hire, it's that much more easier, right? But if you are going out as a new startup, and if let's say that you're a new startup that is not funded or not hugely funded, or not funded by let's say a Sequoia, right? It is not going to be easy at all. And I think that's a place where the effort just increases a lot. And it also kind of helps, it makes you a lot more creative on what kind of people do you hire, given what resourcing, what constraints you have in terms of budget, etc. And how do you sell the whole story to them, right? And make it really exciting for them to still come, because most of the good guys you will get will not be kind of, they'll make some more money, most other places, right? On the specialist versus generalist thing, I think you need a few generalists in the beginning, just for the thing that your problem statements will keep changing, and you can't have a guy. So in the beginning, we had pretty much nobody from the logistics space, right? So and that's also because the logistics guys would come here, ये नया startup है, पता नहीं यहाँ पर क्या होगा, right? They have their own preconceived notions, good and bad. So we also did not kind of have a lot of them reaching out to us, or not a lot of the good guys reaching out, whom we would have loved to hire, reaching out to us. But I think getting some generalists just gives you a lot of ammo to try different things. And I think I don't know how we got some of them. We had a lot of help from one of the VC who came in, right? They used to have a pool that they used to keep circulating, and therefore that was something. But I know how much time I used to spend on LinkedIn, right? Just on trying to figure out who's that guy, just reach out to him, tell him a little bit. So you have to be the magnet. You have to kind of reach out and make it attractive. So you need some generalist guys in the beginning. As you go forward, I think the need for specialist guys increases. But I still think even now, for example, today morning, I interviewed a person for a role, and it's a senior role that we're looking for. And we say it's absolutely fine if he's not from, in fact, it's 100% okay. He's coming from some consulting and some fintech and some e-commerce background. I said there's no problem at all, right? Because I do value the skill set that they bring in terms of first principles problem solving, just being like, sometimes going through a great set of professional organizations where there some things on work ethic, some things on problem solving, some things on just basic communication, understanding is values will be fully well sorted, right? At the same time, we've realized that, especially in a business that you don't fully understand, it is very important. In some roles, it's very important to get some specialists. For example, when we had a business which I mentioned, we've slashed. There's a number that went down significantly. That's a business we kind of deprioritized on. That was a B2B trucking business, and I realized I just don't understand much of the truck. Well, we started the business with some understanding, but I realized we don't really understand it deeply enough. And there we got on sales, right? What is the, there is a sales guy that we needed, and there we put some generalists, and that didn't work out because they didn't have relationships, they didn't have a real understanding of pricing, and I also think they didn't have the sales killer instinct, right? So we got some generalists, they would do it in a particular way, but sometimes in sales, and when we hired one sales guy, we really like, oh, acha, ye hota hai sales mein, right? This is how he would know what the, ye client, this rupees per kg pe bechta hai, to isse ye aise kar sakte hain, like this guy I know who's sitting over there. So I think some of those, skills, knowledge and skill sets that some specialists bring to the table are extremely valuable, but not across the board, right? I would not say, substitute one for the other. But in the beginning, I'd rather go for some generalists because of the way at least the problem statements keep changing and where you want. But after some time, you really need to get some specialists in. But there is always a role for good generalists throughout the life cycle of the company, right? And that I would really think that it's important for us to acknowledge and therefore go after hiring some of those guys with a very, very strong, because they can create tremendous leverage for you, right? All our guys, actually senior leadership, I will make another statement. All the guys in our senior leadership who have done well are all generalists. All the guys who did not do well were specialists. So we did not get a good, match and alignment, or like we could not extract value from the quote unquote specialists. So that's our personal experience. But I also think it's not like a isolated thing. I do think that specialists are great for point solution. Like you can get a sales head or a sales kind of a not even a sales head. One guy below the sales head, he needs to know like really good stuff, right? The sales head, you actually don't need you can manage very well with a very good generalist. So I think it's those kind of people for the horses for the course, right? You have to get the right people for the right kind of org requirement. But at the senior level, you will get a lot of impact with generalists. At least that's our experience.
Awesome. Last question is if you can take us through some of the trends that you see on consumption, on quick commerce, on food, because you are everywhere. So would love to, it'll also open up our thinking. I think not enough is written about quick commerce.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, it's still a lot of people categorize it still as a fad. I personally believe that this will be bigger than e-commerce very, very fast. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just step back and talk a little bit about, in general, consumption patterns in India from having seen it over the past 8 years. And I can give a story. In 2017, we used to go to Guwahati. And, we had to work in our partner's office, and 8 p.m. when you're feeling hungry, then you say, chalo kuch khana mangate hain, right? Because we're coming from Bangalore. So we really there's nothing over there. All restaurants also used to be closed in that place by that time, right? So we had many struggles. Now that is 2017. Fast forward to 2019, or actually, it started from 2019 onwards. Fast forward to now, pretty much every place in Northeast, you can go to Kohima, you can go to Dimapur, you can go to Golaghat, take a place. There is food delivery that's happening, and we are, we feel very proud to be able to push some of those things in all of these parts of the country. You go to Jharkhand, for example, there's a place called Dumka. Most people there will not really know well, right? But that place is doing 600 orders per day, and there's not. I'm just saying, it's actually stagnated a little bit. But when it took off, it just took off like wildfire, right? People used to say, oh, yeah, yahan par aisa bhi hota hai, right? And they just keep ordering. And we were surprised, and with very healthy, for all of these e-commerce platforms, like the food platforms, Swiggy and Zomato, these places actually are unit economics wise better than the larger cities. And that's a big aha, right? And it just tells you that consumption in India has gone really deep, and it is, I think there's still a lot more that exists from whatever we are seeing. Now there'll be a sale.
How many orders would Guwahati be doing per day?
Guwahati now would be doing at least 30,000-40,000 orders a day. This is no exaggeration, right? This is 30,000-40,000 between Swiggy and Zomato. So things have gone really deep and really large, and I don't think it is the end of the road. This is still a lot more to come. There are other constraints, and hopefully, things like ONDC will kind of make it even more democratized. So I just think that consumption in India is generally is going to be there. Second thing I feel is that I think customers across the board want want the same standards, right? Again, I'll give you the whole Northeast example. And it's not that Northeast people want food to come 45 minutes later. It has to come in 30 minutes. Otherwise, the guy will also scream at you, right? Like they do in Bangalore. And the expectations that they have of quality, of service level, etc., are fast catching up. So the choice of what they want to buy, the choice of how they want it to be delivered, etc., is all kind of converging faster than what we think that would be there, right? So that's another one, and therefore it's a matter of time where if you start introducing the quick commerce proposition, it's going to take off. And in some cases, we find that the uptake of some of the services is actually faster in tier 2, tier 3, right? And e-commerce is a classic example because physical retail is missing. It is just going to, like, every time I visit any of these tier 2, tier 3 locations, I say, "Yeah, ठीक है, at least space to ठीक choose किया है," because there is guaranteed business that is going to be there, right? It is just going to grow. So that's on the, and therefore by extension, what it means is quick commerce also will certainly find its way, as you're seeing now. I think Blinkit opened up Vijayawada, they're opening up some many smaller mirror. I think many of these towns have been opened. It's a matter of time where they will go because they're also forced by their valuation considerations to expand the TAM, as they call it, right? So they can't say I'll only be in five top cities. So this is going to go as deep as e-commerce has gone and as food has gone. So therefore, I think from a consumption point of view, massive opportunity. Customers are now premiumizing. Again, like that's one of the trends that we see is that value of GMV of those shipments has grown more than the number of shipments, right? So which means people are buying more and more expensive things as comfort increases with e-commerce. We are seeing the share of COD come down from what it used to be. It's never going to get down to like really low numbers, but again, that's also a very good kind of indicator of the fact that customer trust on platforms is increasing. Yeah, so I think I remain extremely bullish on the overall consumption story that we have. And there will be some, like, we've been seeing e-commerce has not really kind of grown over the past year, 2 years. But I think you have to think about from a longer term angle. And this the mindset that I and we operated is we are playing for 2030. We know by that time there will be 10x more. I don't know, and in fact I don't care about those numbers. I'm just very strong gut feel that it will become really large, and we don't need to know that it's a $100 billion market or $150 billion market, or these are all like stuff for consultants to put some numbers on, right? But really what you need to know is it going to be large and meaningful enough, and that indications are pretty much there. There will be 1-2 years that might not be growing as fast, but it's all going there. Another kind of example is bike taxi, right? Bike taxi is a place where we are now seeing, if you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, massive demand for that, right? Like Super Rapido have done a fantastic job over there, but still there is more and more demand that is available over there. And states that were pushing back on bike taxi because it's also like a regulatorily sensitive topic, now they are saying, okay, it is inevitable, I have to open it up. Maharashtra was a classic case. Maharashtra said, I will not entertain bike taxi, I will make it illegal. Now they've opened it up because they just see that, look, there's such a strong pull from customers that they can't avoid anymore, right? So my broader point is most of the things that you see in the cities, you'll find them in all parts of the country coming out, right? So you have to, of course, figure out how much will be a third wave coffee will not sell as much as it sells in the Korbangla branch as it will sell in, like, let's say, a tier 2 city, right? But those things are just, even that might be surprising for us. They might just also keep selling a lot even in many of the smaller places, right? But I think those things adjusted for that demand and consumption is a no-brainer according to me, and we should all as founders derive comfort and confidence in the fact that demand side story is not going to go off in India. There might be some temporary breaks here and there, but or temporary kind of slowness here and there, but it is going to be something that is a super large and relevant market to go. And another proxy for this is how we see supply, which is the labor force behave, right? Now labor, I feel like, is behaving like how it behaves in some of the developed economies, right? In the sense that our business is actually not limited for demand, it's limited for supply. On Bangalore on Sunday evening, a Saturday evening, we'll have 50,000 riders who are zipping around at around 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. or that like dinner slot, right? And at that time, Swiggy and Zomato are still either turning down or, as they call it, gracefully degrading the orders for at least 5-10% of the customers. So, which means customers are ordering left, right, and center. It's the availability of the delivery boys that is putting the brakes on growth of this, right? So, and we find that this whole thing of delivery boys or any of the blue collar being a lot more kind of sensitive to how much they will work, what wages they'll expect, what standards they'll work under, is all increasing. It's all pointing to the fact that in general, people's standards of living are increasing, which means, again, another kind of extension of that is they are consuming more, they are having higher standards of what they expect on multiple things. So in general, I think we are going for a consumption side, we have a fantastic story shaping up.
Awesome. So what is 10 times in 10 years? What? What's 10 times in 10 years? What's the compounding rate? 25. Okay. Good. That lesson is learned. So it's actually not that crazy a number if you think about it, right? Like some segments will grow at 25% for 10 years, right? If the country's nominal GDP will grow at 10 to 12%, some categories will grow at 25%. So if you're building for something that is 10 today, looks small, but in 10 years that becomes 100, not because of your doing, but because of the country and the growth as Raghu spoke about, it's quite a game changer, right? And I think the Guwahati example always kills me. I've heard the story 5 times, but I am telling you, my wife comes from the Northeast India, and I'll tell you, who knows why at 8 o'clock the restaurant shut in Guwahati? Because the timing. Yeah, exactly. Basically, Guwahati is in China time zone, right? For some, because India is a lazy country, don't want to have 2 time zones, they have decided to keep Guwahati in India time zone. But effectively, it is in Hong Kong, right? If you think about the time zone. So it actually starts, the day starts at 4 o'clock morning and ends at 7 p.m. It's pitch dark at 7, 8 p.m., right? Pitch dark. But the fact that you can have 25,000 deliveries there every day is quite staggering, right? I'm sure a lot of the riders are going around in pitch dark conditions. And it's not like यहाँ की तरह street lights are as good there. Right? So that's just pure demand supply catching up. Cool. I will leave the stage to you now. If you can talk a little bit about the English channel, your swim, and the reason that I want you guys to listen to this is it's not every day you come across a founder who runs a large company and swims the English channel, right? And why would someone do that? Like, it's every founder wants to run in the morning, put up Strava, etc., etc. But why would you swim the English channel, right? It's I'm not going to steal your thunder, but let me tell you, it's a near-death experience. Okay, it's not like ऐसे line लगे हुए हैं और आप, it's not safe, right? So over to you.
I think I'm still figuring it out, I would say. So I would just, that's one important disclaimer, just again, like I said, to make myself more comfortable. And the second one is just on this one. There is a backstory that I want to kind of put out that I started the decision for me to start up was actually also a little bit crazy. I was thinking about it for a long time, and as I'm sure pretty much everybody of you would experience saying, look, you're never sure that you want to start up, right? Or you're never sure you want to start up now, right? So for me, what happened was in 2016, I signed up for a open water swim. This is in a place called Tonnur here, very close to Mysore. And I could swim, but I never did this open water swim. So we went, and that was also the time when I was kind of having thoughts about starting up. One day I would wake up thinking, startup karna chahiye, I should commit now. One day I would say, nahi, it's not the right time. So it was going through that flip-flopping process. And that when I went into that event, I went one day earlier, and I went into the lake and I felt I would die. Right? Literally, I can't tell you how it was an actual near-death experience for me, and I said, I'm not going to do this. So I kind of retreated, and then the next day morning when the actual event was, I said, "Okay, family is come. We've come with so many like other friends had also come. So let me just go in and walk to the lake." I walked, then I dipped my feet, and then I went a little bit, and then somehow I just went in. And there's a halfway mark. When you're coming from the halfway mark, at that time I said, "Look, I feel like I've conquered a very big thing," and somehow like internal bravado and all that went up so much. The next day I told my boss, I'm going to quit and I'm going to start up, right? So I think for me, it was I remember the thought process and the decision that I made in the context of that swim. And therefore I used to go there every year, right? Till COVID. And in between in 2018, bunch of friends with whom I used to do it, they're all very, very like proficient state level. One of them is a international level swimmer. And they said, they did the Indus Channel earlier. And they basically said, like, do you want to come and do it with us this time? This was 2018. I said, any time nahi hai. I mean, and it also sounds very too daunting. So I'm not going to, no chance, right? So I backed out, and they went, and I looked at the photos and all that. This maybe, right? I could have also been a part of this. This year in 2024, last year in November, I was just catching up with one of these friends, and he said, "Look, we are putting together a team again this year, and would you like to come? And if this time is now or never. So we are going and doing this for the last time. We're not going to do this ever. So do you want to do it now?" Right? Again I went back and I was just tossing and turning, and I thought ki just now, or if it said ki kar rahe hain, maybe we'll do it again next time, I'd have pushed it out. But then this now or never thing stuck to me and said, look, it is just it's worth, why don't I stretch myself and think, can I just go for it? Right? And I'll figure out what is the process, all of that later. They said you will be able to, they at least just gave some confidence that you should be able to do it. But you'll have to go through a particular process of preparation and all that. So I consulted with the family and I said, look, this is what I'm thinking. They're saying, look, take it, tumne last time you bola tha, and you chickened out and you kept saying, I should have done it. Why don't you now, if you're really feeling so strongly about it, go for it, right? And now my kids are also growing up. So I felt it's a good thing for them also to kind of get some, some inspiration, right? So I'm like, okay, at least father is doing something interesting. So with all these things, I just went and I didn't again overthink it too much. And I just said, okay, I'll do it, right? So, and for me, the big thing on this one is the fact that I just committed to it was the most difficult part of the whole thing. And again, if you tie it back to your own whole story and whatever you're doing, I think the commitment to doing something big is actually, or signing up for that is actually the biggest and the most difficult part of the whole thing. Many times you'll find it in your company goal setting process and all of those things. You'll say, look, it's a little too difficult and too big, so let's just kind of not think so much, right? And put many constraints and all of this into the way. So that was my kind of how I just jumped in. The English Channel is as you see over there in the map, it's 35 kilometers as the crow flies, but from Dover to this place called Calais. But because of the currents and the tides, it actually ends up you can't swim in a straight line, right? And also just to give full disclosure, it is not that Susmit made me sound like a Superman by doing it solo. I did it as a team relay, which makes it much more easier. So I don't want to kind of give an impression that it's just incredibly hard. Actually, solo is incredibly difficult. Less people have done English Channel solo than the Mount Everest, right? Or summiting Mount Everest. So it is really difficult, right, to do it solo. So I did it as a team of 8 people, and each one basically swims for 1 hour and then passes on to the next one. So you basically divide this into divide by 8, right? Whatever the distance is, by and large, right? So you kind of, so it is a lot more doable. It's not insane, but it does require, I would say, like I think again, it does require a little bit more than average kind of skills. But most importantly, I think the fact is it just requires it requires kind of sticking to a process. And we had a process that we, yeah. Okay. So it requires, so for me, I think what I learned out of this whole thing, and maybe that's what Susmit wants me to say, rather than all this cool thing. So this is a team with which whom I did it. This is the one on my right. He's actually the coach, and one thing I realized is it's impossible to do it anything big without having somebody who knows the game, right, and who knows what to do. It could be in your context many different things, but I think you got to figure out for your game, for whatever you're doing, who's the best guy, and kind of figure out a way to get input, suggestion, advice, mentoring from him or her. He's actually an international swimmer. He has done it multiple times, and he's the secretary of the Karnataka Swimming Association. So he's like a storied guy in the swimming space. This gentleman here is a swimming instructor. This guy is a scuba diving instructor. This girl is a general triathlete, incredible woman. So we had a fairly interesting team that we put together. But the process was kind of well defined, right? The coach exactly knew ki ye karna hai, right? So life became a lot more easier, and we'd have Saturday morning, Sunday morning, 5 a.m. I'd be out of the door and swim for 2 hours straight. That is what is prescribed. You just can't miss it. And I used to tell me it's never convenient, right? But what I used to just tell myself is just like, blindly just don't use your brain, just do what the guy is saying, right? So, I mean, that was my only mindset, and I just said, I'm going to just follow this. So point is that I think there is a lot of value to just following a particular process. It could be for anything. And we also did a bunch of things in preparation for this. One is just like, we swam there was a Goa swimathon, then we went for a 5-kilometer swim in this place called Gunjur. Then one of the most important things about the channel is, so besides the sea swimming and long distance swimming, is the fact that it's freakishly cold. So we had when we swam, it was 13 degrees centigrade. I don't know how to visualize 13 degrees centigrade for most of us. But if you imagine Delhi or any of these North Indian cities in peak winter on 31st December, if you jump into the pool, it will still not be 13 degrees. It might be maybe like 16, 17 degrees. So it is actually really, really cold. So that was the thing for which we had to prepare, and we had to get into a ice bath and spend first time I got into ice bath at 10 degrees, I jumped out in 1 minute, and that was like the most painful 1 minute for me. So it requires a particular process, and in many cases a good coach can give you what the process is. Your job is to kind of fully follow it. The second, I think, second very important thing, and this is, I think, again, all of these have parallels in your day-to-day life, and that is what I kind of learned out of it, is I think it's a lot about the kind of people that you are with. If you're with people, there are people who you would say, "Arey, yaar, ye kyun kar rahe ho?" It's like crazy. These are people who said, look, there's a guy who's actually done it. He says it's not impossible. You can do it, right? And I've made people do it. There are other people who are saying, look, we feel very excited about it, and we think we can do it. And when you're associating with these kind of people, you naturally kind of start your mindset blocks kind of go away, right? Or kind of are reduced significantly. So I think what matters a lot, and you apply that in your day-to-day life, in the company that you're building, your choice of co-founders, choice of investors, choice of people that you're hiring, choice of people that you're hanging out with, has got a massive impact on how you think and what you think can be done, what you think can't be done, right? So very, very critical lesson that I kind of internalized as a part of this was just hang out with people who will help you become really, really good, better in whatever dimension that you choose, right? And the last one is, I think, just the power of thinking big. We could have decided that the target is to swim 2 kilometers, and that is success. Uh, but there was somebody at least crazy to say in this thing called the English Channel that can be swum, and the goal became very different from saying the goal would be actually to just do a 2 kilometer swim in the sea, right? So I think the here again, and when I was swimming the channel, at least when I was doing the swim, my part of it, I was thinking, yeah, this could have been me feeling great about it while signing up for a 2 kilometer swim even, and say, okay, chalo, मैंने तो बहुत कुछ कर दिया, right? And I can feel great about it and gloat about it to multiple people. But the fact that the goal itself was chosen to be something much larger actually makes it that and it says that it can be possible, and therefore what at least I kind of thought when I was thinking is that it's actually a crime to think small. You right now and you, because you don't know what you can do, your company, etc., right, whatever dimension you want to apply it on. So at least and that's a tough one, right, because you kind of have a lot of self doubt on what you can do, what you can't do. So the big thing is actually come back and think a lot more bolder, is at least what I told myself. And I just truly believe that all of us, in whatever dimension, we are not anywhere close to what we think, what can be actually done. It's just a matter of what is the goal that you've chosen, right? And how strongly do you believe in the goal, and then work out the rest of the mechanics around it, right? So it doesn't mean that you sign up for something silly, but it does mean that whatever you're thinking, there's a chance to ask yourself, can this be done like 5x better, or can I do 5x more than what I'm doing right now, right? And I think that once you start having a convergence of that thought and you're kind of coming close from a belief point of view to saying that thought is actually possible, I think the rest of the kind of magic or rest of the thing kind of unfolds, and you figure out, okay, now the process is this. Now, okay, for this I need to hang out with these guys. So really, the starting point is how big can you think, right, and how bold can you think, and then kind of figure everything around it, right? So these are at least my some thoughts that Susmit told me is good and worth sharing. I think one upshot is I was not very disciplined about just general fitness and all of this. But I think in the process of this, I think it made my life a lot more disciplined. If you have to wake up on Saturday and Sunday at 5 a.m. and be out of the door at 5 a.m., you just can't have any late nights and movies, drinking, partying, all of that is kind of completely out of the window, right? So I think just general discipline goes up. I try to, like, after this is now 2 months since, and I think generally I've been a lot more disciplined. I try to continue doing that. Other thing is, I think really family and team matters. This required investment for me to stay away from go to the UK for 3 weeks. And I think I'm really grateful for the fact that the team from my side, they just basically say, you go, we'll cover. It's not easy to say work from there, etc. So I think that way, very grateful to that. And I think as you figure out in your entrepreneurial venture, right, extremely important to take the family along. It makes a lot of difference if you have less kind of interference or less kind of challenges coming from there. So it's, I think, very important. I wish I'd done a little better on this front, but just to kind of keep your whole family engaged on what you're doing, why you're doing, making them almost like making them feel that they're doing it, right? I think that's a pretty good one to like take out the interference from your potential, right? So I think those are few other things that I think I at least thought I learned from this, which I can apply in my current life beyond all this stuff.
Thanks for sharing that, Raghu. You spoke a lot about how important it is to bring on a great team at the beginning. My question is that I can understand the line of thought where you are bringing in employees who are passionate or who are motivated to solve a problem, but the problem keeps evolving in the beginning. So, what is it that you told the early stage employees that joined Loadshare? How did you get them to buy into something that was evolving?
Yeah, so look, I think it takes a lot of constant communication. And when you're making changes, so let you have an initial picture that you've sold, right? That you've kind of presented to whoever is a new employee coming on board. And that picture hopefully also doesn't change dramatically in like a few weeks, months, etc. Right? It takes a little bit of time to evolve, and in that process, you have to keep telling people how things are moving, and they themselves also see it. And as long as you're kind of giving them a picture saying, look, I brought you in saying we were going to do this particular thing, and by the way, this is not working, but we are going to pivot and we are going to do something else. As long as not completely off, the person will by and large understand, right? Or the team will by and large understand. If it is completely off, then I think there's obviously a thing to discuss and for you to think about whether it's the right team at all in the first place. But I think what is more important is, in general, to give the team full visibility of where are you going as a company and what is working well, what is not working well. Transparency in the form of like small all hands that you do, saying, "Acha, this was a month." We used to religiously do it in the beginning. We used to in fact show a lot of our financial numbers also very, very clearly. So we said this, and that at least gave folks some confidence and trust that the company is, yes, there are things that are changing at the company, but by and large, it's not that we are doing, like I said, right, from logistics swinging all the way to a fintech. That's not happening. But in the logistics thing, we're figuring out, okay, this doesn't work. You have to kind of navigate and move a little bit to the side and do something different. And as long as you're kind of giving them transparency, I don't think you'll have a challenge, really.
Yeah, you spoke about generalists and specialists, right? Now, looking at co-founders, how much of specialization do we really look in the while we are looking for complementary skills? So, are we okay with some sort of general?
See, I think some places you can't compromise, right? You can't get a saying you want a tech co-founder, he has to be a tech guy, right? I mean, he can be a tech guy who's also a great generalist thinker, that's possible, but you can't have a generalist and say he is going to solve for the tech part of it, right? So there are some places where you need to really have those specific skills onboarded, right? Or with the person. There the generalist thing doesn't work. But otherwise, I think if you have, let's say, and you need not be only 2 people, 3 people, right? You can have 4, 5 people. In that, if you have a couple of generally very strong folks with some kind of a thing on, like, this is an area that they know well. It could be a particular topic or it could be a particular skill set. It could be a functional specialization, right, that they know well. That should serve. But I mean, some places you can't say, generalist coming and do something which is required. Actually, the domain of a specialist, especially on tech, I would say that's important. Other things a generalist you can have a generalist co-founder and say, okay, he is going to now figure out how to do marketing. Can figure out. Some of these things you can figure out with a very good generalist guy, assuming he has some experience and some exposure. But in some places, I don't think it is possible for a generalist to figure out, especially on tech, to go deep and say, I can now, because I'm so good, I can figure out how, on the tech side also do a good job on.
Hey, Raghu, thank you for sharing this. It's incredible. My question is, given you are serving these, Swiggies and Zomatos, and they are being squeezed for they're competing on margins, how does their economics affect your economics?
Yeah.
How do you figure out
It's very tight. So that's why, I just want to make sure everybody doesn't think that we are anywhere close to having arrived. We have a journey ahead because our clients also have a journey ahead of them, right? So, so we need to. So it is a very, very competitive space. One, because ultimately our customers are also they're not fully sorted out their things. And therefore they will transmit cost pressures on us, right? And we have also, like everything in India, I think there is competition everywhere, right? And in logistics, it's quite competitive. And therefore, even with that, we have a bunch of other people that who are also, some of them are very well funded, some of them are less funded. So there's competition there also. So what is therefore imperative for us is to say, can we do better than whatever is so we have to, again, therefore it's a commodity, right? And therefore you have to be the one that is at the extreme where you are saying, I am the least cost provider of this service. So you got to start keep working on saying what can you do. Swiggy and delivery will naturally need delivery boys, right? So they will take from either they will build their own fleet, which they have, or they'll take from company A, company B, company C. In this whole spectrum, can you be, there'll be cost pressure. Therefore, can you to just make sure you're still kind of creating some value and some relevance for the future? Can you be the company that is going to be the least cost provider of this service, right? That's the problem to be cracked. In our case, what we've done is we've said, look, there is going to be a mad rush for delivery boys everywhere. Can we actually reframe ourselves to be saying, how can we think about providing the delivery boy the best earnings option, the best earnings per hour at the time that he needs it? So then we can use that to our advantage to say, we can actually provide to our customers the least cost option, right? So, and how we do that is by using the delivery boy for different use cases at different times of the day. For example, our delivery boy does food delivery during lunch and dinner, but at different points of the day, we are able to use him for doing, for example, bike taxi. For example, we are able to use him for doing e-commerce and hyperlocal deliveries. So that way we are saying that rider is actually, we are able to give him enough earnings, and therefore the numerator is pretty much the same, right? I have to give him, let's say, 800, 900 rupees per day. Can I now figure out so many orders to give so that the denominator increases, the cost per order that I can offer to the customer kind of reduces? So it's about saying there will be pressure, and therefore it's a tough industry, but how do you figure out your place to be the lowest cost provider of this? What's the innovation you're doing to get there is the most important thing. And I think we have made some progress, but I don't think we are fully there yet.
Hi, Raghu.
Hey, Raghu.
I-
Super impressive with Loadshare and also with the name. Quick question with the first team or the founding team that you create. Generalists and specialists aside, do you prefer experience or would you also take a bet on like freshers, especially for your core early team?
So we had a bunch of freshers that we hired, and some of them are outstanding. So I think I would highly recommend getting a bunch of good freshers. They also come like relatively inexpensive, so it's not a bad idea at all. And all said and done, you have, for example, I could not hire anybody that I'd worked with in all my previous companies till like maybe series B plus, because budget is not there, and all the folks that we'd worked with are all like highly expensive, and nobody wants to take a huge pay cut to come, and it is, nobody took that chance with me. But I would say, therefore, you have to be mindful of the fact that you will have really strong budget constraints, and you have to innovate. And one of the places where you'll get good talent, that you have to then identify the right guys over there, right? Because not all freshers are the same. You take your time to identify the right freshers, but get a bunch of them. They can add a lot of good value in the beginning. So absolutely yes to getting freshers rather than just get experienced guys. And the experienced guys that you get at that time, if they're very experienced, they come with a lot of baggage. So that's also one thing to be watchful of. It's not to say that everybody will, you need to get some of them, but you have to be a little careful.
Yeah, I have a question. So, how far down the line your current co-founders joined you? You talked
No,
about-
so one of them, we have 3 co-founders now,
Yeah.
and one of them was there right from the beginning, and one joined us pretty much like a few months after we started, but is not too far away. So it's not that everybody has to join on day 0.
But like, how did you handle the conflict when those 2 relationships did not work out, which you mentioned? Like,
I mean, you got to accept it and not stress about it, and just move on to what do you do to solve it. So interpersonally with them, or like in general about managing yourself.
both.
Both. I think, look, both on yourself. I think you have to say, look, you did it just happened. So what do you do now? You still have to move the thing forward. So you just have to push yourself into a solution finding mode than to like lament about "Arey, ye ho gaya, wo ho gaya," and all that stuff, right? So that's one. The second one is, I think, interpersonally with them, one guy, I mean, we quickly patched up. He said, "ठीक है, हो गया, चलो, whatever, right? Let's move forward." It was not perfect. With the other guy, actually, we didn't speak for 3 years. And after 3 years, he actually reached out and said, look, I'm sorry, whatever, right? I had these things. I said, take it, it's okay. I mean, forget and move on, kind of stuff, right? So it's okay now. No problem at all. I think that some of the things in general, I think in life, I think we should not take any of these things too seriously. It happens. I think you could be on the other side. You don't know what the constraints and considerations were from that person. So I think it's okay. I mean, you just have to be a lot more relaxed. I think same thing when people are, you will find that at some point your best employees will leave you. What do you do? Will you feel like upset and will you be, cutty with him, or will you say, I understand where you're going and I understand what you're doing. So I think these are all things that I think a lot of it you learn in the whole journey, which you would not have faced if you're in your regular jobs, for sure.